So when the Victorian visitor arrived here at Groudle, the layout was slightly different here at Sea Lion Rocks. The layout was slightly different to what you see today. The paths would be laid out much the same as you see in front of you, but actually the main entrance down to the zoo was through here, through the back of our station building. So the visitor would have come down this path, they would have walked through, bought their tickets to go down to see the zoo, gone down the path there and come back up what is now the way out effectively, and the way that we use to get down to the zoo. So we're here now on the site of the zoo at Groudle, and the first thing you see is a prominent cast iron pipe at the top of the bay here. That's carrying water, or did carry water, from a dam in the next ravine over, and that was part of an early public water supply scheme on the island. That pipe runs all the way under the railway. It runs down into what is now the Groudle Beach car park, where there was a pumping station, and that pumping station pumped the water up to a reservoir underneath the House Straight golf course, from where it ran down into Douglas. It was an early attempt to get clean water into Douglas after some cholera outbreaks in the early to mid 1800s. Now the zoo itself was on the site that we see in front of us, and the first thing to note, which is no longer here unfortunately, is that there was a bridge across from more or less where we are standing now, which would take the visitor over to an enclosure on the far side of the inlet here. It looks a little bit like a World War II gun emplacement, but it's not. It was in fact an enclosure for polar bears, and there were 2 polar bears delivered when the zoo opened. They both came from Bellevue Zoo in Manchester and were named Nellie and Jumbo, and they lived over in that enclosure with visitors walking around the top and actually able to feed them, see them, admire them, and then wander back over this way. And then down in the actual inlet itself, the inlet was dammed and a gate was put up, and this is where the sea lions lived, hence the name of the 2 locomotives, Sea Lion and Polar Bear, named after the animals in the zoo. And the sea lions again came from Bellevue Zoo in Manchester. It's quite a sad story associated with that really. We believe they ordered a number of sea lions, possibly as many as 6. But sadly, back in those days, they didn't really know how to transport live animals those sorts of distances, and sadly, only a couple of them actually made it across to Groudle. Sea lions were named Tommy and Josephine, and there were wires across here, and the keeper would wheel fish out, but the sea lions would jump up and catch the fish, and it was a popular, obviously, attraction for the Victorian visitor to look at what was going on within the zoo. Now the sea lions had a little house, and it's very difficult to see from up here, and it's quite difficult to actually get to. We wouldn't advise anyone to try and scramble around this site. It is on private property and it is actually quite dangerous. But right up at the head of the inlet here, there is a little house, which is where the sea lions would shelter from some of the winter storms. Must have been quite frightening really to be down there in some of the easterly gales that we get through the winter months. Nice on an evening night like this, but through the middle of the winter it must have been quite a bleak environment to live in.
And finally, we've mentioned there how sea lion and polar bear took their names from the creatures that are at the zoo. We of course have a locomotive called Brown Bear.
We do. Well, there's all sorts of things that went on this side actually. And there was an aviary where we believe they had tropical birds. There was also a brown bear cub at some point during the history of the zoo, which was chained to a rock, and you could pay an amount of money and actually unchain this bear and take it for a walk. So these are the sorts of things that used to interest the Victorians. I'm not sure you get away with it today, but that was all on this kind of lower area here that we're standing on now.
And very much now an echo of what it once was, although when you and I were young there were still remains of the bridge.
There were. The bridge has survived until fairly recently really, and there are volunteers that are involved in the railway that were around or have been around long enough to have been able to walk across the bridge. I think when I first came down here, maybe one pillar and some of the rails were still standing, but you certainly couldn't cross it at that point. But you have been able to cross it within reasonably recent times. But yeah, it's obviously a sorry state nowadays, but it's an interesting piece of history, an interesting piece of heritage. I don't think we'll restore the zoo though. I think we've got enough to do with the railway.
Most definitely. And if people want the full history of this, of course, it's available in the book that's in our shop on when you come to visit.
There's some excellent pictures of the zoo. If you come to visit the railway, some excellent pictures within the station building here at Sea Lion Rocks. You can see the sea lions and the polar bears that we've talked about, and the bridge and the Victorian visitors, the brown bear cub. But our guidebook is well worth purchasing if you're interested in the history of Groudle as one of those Victorian tourist attractions that sort of sprang up from nowhere, but one that has managed to survive right the way through until the present day.